Okay, so my name is Kristie Manley, and this is just a little bit about Kentucky Center for Mathematics if you are not familiar. They do a great job reaching teachers all across the state, and this is just a very, very small synopsis of all the great work that they have done. This is their website. It is one of my favorite places to go. It's one thing I share with everybody. They have stuff, like if you're an MIT like me and you have, you need information about the MAF grant, it's attached to their website. If you're looking for professional development, it's there. If you're looking for games, it's there. If you're looking for their conference, it's there. Everything is there. It's a great website. So if you've not checked it out, please do so. Here I am. This is my email address. You can follow me on Twitter. Only do Twitter if you like math, because that is all my Twitter is all about. A little bit about me. I have been connected with KCM for 8 years. I think if they do a PD, I am there. I've been an instructional coach. I've really gotten back into my crafting lately. Don't know why. I do have one little girl, and I will say I am one of those people that talks with their hands. And when I talk math, I usually like to have a lot of stuff in front of me. So this is a little out of my comfort zone, considering I am behind a screen talking to you. All right, I am an MIT through the MAF grant. It is meant to be able to provide intensive intervention to primary through 12th grade, and we are very excited that the state of Kentucky has put that out there for us. Here is our agenda today. As at MIT, I have tried to focus on multiple things, and structuring has been my big focus, and I started with structuring within 10 and 20, and then I started to see the connection within 100, and that's kind of where I'm going to talk about today, is how I'm slowing that down, like the KCAS standards slowed down fluency to 10. They do a great job breaking that down, and then they kind of like rush through 100. So I'm going to talk about how I want to slow that down. Of course, we'll have the research, the standards. I've got some adorable videos, and of course, games and resources. But if anything you want to say, please chime in and let's make this a conversation. I am all about just talking about math. So let's get started. So the research that I dug into with this is the concept that we really want kids to be flexible and being able to decompose those numbers to develop that deep understanding. And structuring is a great way to do that, because that builds that composite thinking. And we want them to have the why. So we want them to have that deep understanding of numbers and why things work. A lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about today comes from the Green Book, Robert Wright's research. I call it the Green Book. Anybody in my building, we say the Green Book, they know what I'm talking about. A lot of the stuff is going to come from things you've probably heard if you've attended anything from KCM. And Math Recovery also is a great resource. They have fabulous Fluency to 100 book that has great activities around the bead string. So if you have not checked that out, please do so. And I see someone else say, I love the Green Book. I know, that is the picture of my book, and you see all the tabs. I use it. It is the book. Okay, so these are the standards. The big standard that we're going to focus on is that second grade standard of MBT 5, that fluently add and subtract within 100. I put those other ones on there because you can kind of see how when they're talking about 20 and 10, the standards are really outlined and really broken down, and we do a great job of making sure, if you look at the kindergarten standards, the first grade standards, of making sure kids know their partners of 10, how to break apart all those numbers through 10. And we do a really good job of doing that. And then you get to the fluency to 100, and it's like, they should know place value and properties and relationships. And I really want to break that down and go a little bit slower. We do have that standard in first grade of 10 more, 10 less than the multiples, but I want to break it down even more. And I will refer to the seal, and the seal comes from Steffi's research. And when I read his work, it is very heavy. So I really like this guy's article on the seal. Jonathan Thomas and Pamela, they did a great job of taking Steffi's research and outlining the stages really simplistically. And this is just a graphic that shows you. So today I'm focusing on those kids that are already in this initial stage and getting them to FASL, because when they're initial, they have that composite thinking and they're ready to get many strategies that are non-count by ones. And so this is where what I'm talking about today would fall in to place. So I know if you've been AVMR trained or math recovery trained, you've heard that once you get them to stage 3, SEAL 3, you got to hit structuring really hard. And so I just put this in here to give you a reminder of what is structuring. We do start out with the fingers. We got the bead strings, the dot patterns, 10 frames, of course. And I have found that I like to keep that going within 100, using a lot of the same materials, just in different ways to make that connection with them. So I'm gonna get started here. This is, so after you do the 10 more, 10 less, and adding multiples of 10, where they're doing jumps of 10, I have found that going to that next stage where they are adding up or subtracting down to a decable. So this is straight from the Green Book. I'm just gonna model, this is me modeling how I normally would do in front of people. This is my video of modeling adding up to a decable. And I'm hoping my video works. Okay, so I'm going to build a number, and I want to build 33. Okay, so here's my 33. How much more do I need to get to 40?
7.
Okay, how did you know?
Because I know 7 plus 3 equals 10.
Okay, when they get real comfortable with being able to do it with everything visible, then we're going to add some screening in. So here's another one. This time I'm going to build, let's do 56. So I built 56, and now I'm going to screen it. I have 56. How much more to get to 60?
4.
How do you know?
Because you just add 4 to it.
How did you know it was 4? What were you thinking?
Adding 4 to the other number.
Which other number? Okay, I had 56. So what were you doing?
6 plus 4.
What does 6 plus 4 do?
Equals 10.
Equals 10. Were you right? Okay, so if you look there and noticing the use of structuring, if anybody wants to make a comment or anything that you see, how that stuff that you do within 10 really can come into play and help with the larger numbers. If anybody wants to chime in, if maybe you've done something similar or you have a follow-up.
I really like how you questioned the student, because when you asked with 56, how many you need, she said the correct response, 4. But you asked over and over again to get to the idea of making explicit 6 plus 4, that's making 10. I think that was really important.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Kristie, I think your use of your hundreds reckon rec, that board really helped it helped us to see, and it helped her to be reminded of the models and how to use them to answer your question. So I really like that tool.
Anybody, I don't want to cut anybody else off. Okay, on this one, I did use the record rec. On the next one, this is subtraction, and I changed the setting, and this time we're going to be using 10 frames again. Just kind of keep that focus on how they're using structuring, and then think about now that they've got, and they're going back to those partners of 10, and if they've done the 10 more, 10 less, then we can bridge and make that connection for those kids that don't make that connection on their own. So let me see if this one will play. Okay, in this video, we are going to be using 10 frame cards, and we're going to subtract down with decibel. First, I'm going to establish the first quantity. Okay, how much do you see here, Kenzie?
34.
How much?
34.
34. Okay, if we have 34 and I take 4 away, what's left?
30.
Okay, I will do several like this, and then I change it up to where I use a screen. So first, I'm going to establish the first quantity. How much do you see?
22.
Okay, so then I screen it. If I have 22 and I'll take 2 away, what's left?
20. 20.
20. Okay, and then we go through that several times until they're really comfortable subtracting down to a decibel. Okay? All right, any comments, any follow-ups of what you would do next, anything that you noticed?
I have a quick question. So would you be doing bundles and sticks before this, or would you be mixing it in as far as your progression with the 100 bead and then the 10 frames?
I use the bundles and sticks usually when we're doing the 10 more. And then I have found like the 10 frames that you see in this video and the bead rack to be a little bit more distancing to where, because they can't break those apart physically, but they can still see the pieces. And then I also like to move in after 10 frames, and as I'm using the bead rack, the dot strips, I don't know if I'm going to be able to explain that right, but they look like base 10 pieces, but you can see all the dots on them. But I do start with bundles and sticks, but more for the 10 more or the multiples of 10, and maybe just when I'm adding just the ones. I kind of like to move them and get them familiar with all different kinds. That's just me. Other people may have a better answer.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
And what is the purpose of, can you explain a little bit more about the purpose of screening?
Say that again.
Screening, can you explain why you're screening, or do you ever not screen?
Well, with the screening is where I'm trying to get them to move to the mental images where they can create those, the mental math. So always start where they can see it sometime and get familiar. And then when I feel like, okay, they're just kind of going through the motions, then I screen it and kind of up the rigor for them to kind of not rely on the visual. Good question. Anybody else? Now, I will say after I go through, subtracting to a decibel and adding up to a decibel, that is when I do then start trying to get them to make that connection, like I said, between jumps of 10 and seeing those partners. I've also found these strategies here, the adding and subtracting to a decibel, helps those kids when it comes to that lovely 3rd grade standard of rounding. So just keep that in mind. I don't know if you all ever have that experience with 3rd graders when rounding is hard, but this, if it's a kid that I've worked with and we've done this strategy, rounding has come a little bit easier to them. So it's just another reason I have loved these smaller steps. And I will say, like I said, Robert Wright in his teaching the initial child, the section on place value, the way he has broken those lessons down, I love them and I go through them. They have worked. All right, so unless anybody has, oh yeah, you have rounding. I know, it's not fun. I saw it in chat. Some games that I have created or used with kids. So after I have introduced these skills and we've moved to the screening where I feel pretty good about what they're doing, I will introduce a game. Now I will say I like my games to be very simplistic because as an MIT, I have 20 minutes to teach these kids. And so I didn't want to spend a lot of time on instructions of a game. So some of the games I'm going to show you, I have used with all different kinds of topics. That way I don't have to teach the game. We can focus on the math. Now this game, How Far Away, I made it. So feel free in your handouts to tweak it, make it whatever you want. It's a little mouse and everybody gets to cover the zero, and they're trying, it's like one of those coverall games where they're trying to get their entire path for the mouse completed. So if you have place value dice, are great. If you have a clear spinner, then you can just pick the numbers that you want and put on the spinner. It's all up to how intentional or what you need for your kids. So they would either spin or they would roll the place value dice. And the great thing about this is that you can use it to either add up to the decable or subtract down. So whichever one you're working on that day. So let's say they rolled and they got 56 and you're adding up, then how many more to the next decable? So if they had 56, they would need 4 more. So they would cover the 4. And they would, on the game board, you'll see both, there's 2 paths on it. And so you can play 2 kids at a time. And the goal is to get their path covered. So that's just a very simple coverall game to where you can practice that. And like I said, you either do it adding or subtracting, you decide. And then I don't know about you, but my kids love to play Bump It. Some people call it Move It. They love to be able to move their opponent's piece and get them out of the way. So I use Bump It with everything. And again, it's the same thing to where you either use a spinner, place value dice, and you can use this. The game board says adding to a decable, but you can switch it up and make it subtraction. They roll their dice and they have to determine how many more to the next decable. And like I said, if you're like me, I like very simple things. At the bottom of this slide, you see where it says free bingo cards. This website will generate your game boards. It says bingo, but I put any title on there. And you can put any numbers, and then it will make you multiple game boards. And it will make the small ones so each kid can have their own game board if you want that. I'm one of those that sometimes I need like very certain numbers, and this helps me be very specific in what I use for the kids. And it's really easy. You just type the numbers in, hit print, and you're done. So you can make Bump It games, whatever. It does say bingo, but you can change the title. So that's a great thing there. So Bump It, my kids love that. And then 4 in a row, even though it says 4 in a row, my kids wind up saying, hey, can we play Bump It? But sometimes I won't let them move it. So 4 in a row is a lot like Bump It, except they just don't move their opponents, and they can both have their own game board. It's the same thing. You use a spinner or a dice to roll, and you decide, are you adding or subtracting? And again, that website can make your game boards for you, and you can even choose pretty little borders on there as well. Totally up to you. But again, I like things really, really simple. So in your handouts, you get the How Far Away game, silly little game that I made. Change it however you want. Bump It. Like I said, I use Bump It for everything. So I gave you multiple versions of Bump It. Yes, you have adding to a decable, subtracting down to a decable, and then I've used it for partners of 5, the small and large partners of 10. When you're, oh my goodness, the teen numbers. I did number word after with teen numbers, and then when you're trying to, that number word after crossing the decade from 29 to 30. So those are all the different versions of Bump It. And then the same thing with 4 in a row. It's an easy game that once you've taught the rules, you can play it with any concept. So you have adding up and subtracting down to a decable, partners of 5. Number word before I did with the one within 100 on this one, partners of 10. You can also do it with number ID, to where if you have a dot dice, they count the dots and then they find the number on the game board. So if you have kids still trying to ID those numbers, it's a better way, a fun way to try to learn those numbers. And then of course, those lovely team numbers. I gave you a set of 10 frame cards because I love doing that. And then the dot strips that I talked about that I cannot describe very well with my fingers. Does anybody have any questions or anything about what's on your handouts? I talked very fast, by the way. Okay, I think we're pretty good.
I'm going to put the handout thing in one more time for everyone so that you have that handy. There you go.
All right, if you, a lot of my kids, they use Google Classroom. And so sometimes I try to find little games that I can assign them through Google Classroom that works specific on what we are doing in my small group. I've done this with like the team members and I'm ready. That's always a big one for me. And then this is an online game that is just on going to that next decable. So I gave you an online in case you need an online option for kids to practice either when you're not in the room or when they are not with you or with their teacher. So you all can check that out. And then again, this is just a quick snippet of the resources that I have used when I'm trying to really break down, and I could talk all day on breaking down the fluency to 100. I just had to pick one thing to do it in 30 minutes. So this is just some of the materials that I used. You can see the place value dice, the rec and rec base 10 pieces. This is kind of like the little dot strips. I tried to get a good image there. And then I've linked some online ones. So the first one takes you straight to base 10 pieces that you can use. And then Toy Theater has the rec and rec. So those are just some online options if you need to do it virtually. I know sometimes we're in a pinch, and if you can't carry all your stuff with you to a classroom, if you have an iPad, kids can still practice this stuff within your groups, even if it's virtual. I'm just checking to make sure I didn't miss anything in the chat room. Okay, so here is KCM's website. So if you've missed anything, the previous PD sessions, they're here. The ones from this week, including today, will be linked, and you can see that there's stuff already planned for next week. So please check them out. And again, there's the website. And this is what is planned this week. Tomorrow, you can see Lisa Riggs. Now she was my trainer. Yay! And then Michael Hines, I found out I live in Nelson County and so does he. So there's a connection there. So there's lots of good stuff happening this week. So please check back. And then here is my information again. So please, if you have any questions or follow-ups, email me or find me on Twitter. So unless anyone has anything else.
Thank you, Kristie. Very good. One of the things we like to do at the end of all of these is have folks give a shout out for our leader about things that they found interesting, things that they've learned, or just good kudos. And so I want to give folks an opportunity to do that either in the chat box or you can unmute and let Kristie know.
Kristie, it's Kristie. Great job once again. I know that I'm always wanting to find resources from you. So thank you. And thank you for showing the distancing from the setting, because Lisa, we always talk about that, how that's hard. And so I really appreciate that you connected that. That was really well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that Kristie went to a lot of trouble to add multiple variations of the games that she loves. That's the practical part of being at MIT and thinking about things in short doses. From the Kentucky Center for Mathematics, we say that this is the most beautiful time to slow down, send kids small doses of things that they can do to keep them engaged. And so, Kristie, I think you just handed our folks that have attended weeks worth of materials for them to be able to share with their teachers across the state of Kentucky. So I thank you for that.
I like the interviews very much incorporated. It made the content very realistic and seeing how the kids really respond to those ideas, and also great resources. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, Kristie. Thank you so much. And I love how you were able to apply the games to whatever and make it differentiated for your students. That's what an MIT has to do. So that's awesome. Great job.
Thank you.
We want to thank all of you for joining us. So many of you have come 2 o'clock every day for a couple of weeks now. And so I really want to thank you all for spending good quality time with us. Feel free to keep coming if you missed any. As Kristie said, all those things are archived there and will be there for you. Go back and check all of those things out. Have a good rest of your day. See some of you tomorrow at 2.